Grover Lamro Hoopes' autobiography, written around Christmas 1995.
Read by an AI clone of Lamro Hoopes. First trip, while we were at Fort Grant, my brother George Arthur, G.A., was born. He was born in October 1930. In August, Mother and Wyeth, Avon, and me went to Phoenix so Mother could be with her doctor, Dr. Shoup. Mother stayed with her sister, my Aunt Muriel. Wyeth and Avon stayed with Mother, and I was sent back to Mesa to stay with Grandpa and Grandma Lamoureux. This was a different experience for me, as I had never before been away from my mother and dad. At age 10, I sure got very lonesome and homesick for my family. I went to school but didn't learn very much because of no friends or family. Transportation was not the same then as now. From the time I left Phoenix to go stay in Mesa, I didn't see Mother or my new baby brother until G.A. was almost 1 month old. When we left Fort Grant to go to Phoenix in August, Dad took us in the car to Wilcox, and we went from Wilcox to Phoenix on the train. This was my first ride on a train, and I enjoyed it. The one thing I didn't like about the trip was I had to wear knickerbockers. I can't remember wearing them before or since. It was sometime in late November when Dad came over in the car, and we went back to Fort Grant. While at Fort Grant, Dad let me go with him hunting and fishing. I learned to love both sports, and it has stayed with me all of my life. The Depression, January 1933, we moved from Fort Grant back to Thatcher. This was the beginning of the Depression, which affected all of the world. Dad had no work, no income. Things were bad for us, yet we had it much better than most families. We lived on a 20-acre farm. Dad and Mother purchased the farm from Grandpa and Grandma Lamoureux in 1926. Because we were on the farm, Dad planted wheat, corn, and alfalfa hay. These were the crops we could feed to chickens, turkeys, rabbits, pigs, cows, and horses. Also, we took wheat and corn to a grist mill in Pima and had flour and cornmeal made, paying for it with a share of the wheat and corn. We had an average of about 50 laying hens, and we could trade eggs for salt, pepper, sugar, and other things we couldn't raise or furnish from the farm. We could kill a calf and pig about Thanksgiving time, make salt pork, bacon, and cured ham. The beef we would hang under the eaves on the north side of the house at night and take down in the early morning and wrap in blankets. This let us have beef and pork in the winter. In the summer, we ate chicken and rabbits for meat.
New home.
The house we bought with the farm was lumber, but not 2x4 walls covered outside and inside, but 1x12 standing on end with narrow slats nailed over the edges where the lumber came together. The floor was lumber and resting on the ground in many places. The moisture and cold came through the walls and floor. We seemed to have a lot of sickness, colds, and croup. G.A. had diphtheria. Dr. Platt and Uncle Glenn thought we should get out of the house. The summer of 1934, Dad started building a new house. He arranged to have adobes made. They dug the basement and used the dirt to make the adobes. I was old enough to help a lot. We were able to get the walls up and the roof on before winter. Almost all of the material came from the old house. Dad would trade his work for things needed, for things we didn't have. He worked for Ben Burnett, and in return, Ben plastered the house inside and out. Depression Christmas. It is interesting for me to think back how we accepted things then. One Christmas, all the presents we got were clothes made over or made from feed sacks, nothing else, but we were happy because we had each other, plenty of food, and we were warm. By 1936, the government started a lot of plans which gave people jobs so they could buy some of the things they needed. I applied for a job at the school. I got the job cleaning several classrooms. The pay was $20 per month. This job didn't last but a few months.
Drugstore job.
Uncle Glenn came to me and asked me to work in the drugstore after school and all day Saturday for $5 per week. I worked in the drugstore for a total of a little over 6 years, 30 to 40 hours a week for the same $5 per week, and I saved some of it when I stopped working September 1940 to fill a mission in the southern states. I had about $50 saved. This isn't much by our standards now, but then it was pretty good. My mission was for 2 years. The first 2 weeks we were instructed by the general authorities in Salt Lake. Our mission headquarters were at Atlanta, Georgia. I went by train from Salt Lake to Atlanta. Arriving in Atlanta on Sunday, we were met at the station, taken to the mission home where lunch was ready for us to eat. After lunch, they took us to a park and we held an outdoor meeting. There were about 6 or 8 of us. We sang a song, had opening prayer. Then each one of us was called to speak. I can't remember what I talked about. I do remember that I bore my testimony, and the only audiences were some ducks and swans on a pond. We had a closing song and closing prayer. After staying in Atlanta that night, I was assigned and left for Florida Monday morning. I enjoyed my time in Florida. I was there for 1.5 years, working most of the time in only 3 places, Gainesville, St. Augustine, and Jacksonville, and all of my companions were good men and good missionaries. The one I enjoyed the most was Elder Ralph Jones. His hometown was Duncan, Arizona. Our background was much the same, so we thought a lot alike. Also, he was my companion when my brother Avon died and was a great comfort to me. The last 6 months of my mission was in Mississippi. My companion and I were assigned to the southeast quarter of the state to be traveling missionaries. Our job was to contact all of the members in these parts and hold meetings with them. We would drive for 3 or 4 hours to a family's house and ask them if we could hold a meeting that evening. Then ask them to go contact their friends and neighbors and invite them to the meeting. Sometimes they came, but most of the time it was just the member family present. This was a different type of missionary work, and I enjoyed it. I have always enjoyed being out in the open country and hills, so this was a pleasant way to end my mission. I had many wonderful experiences on my mission. One that stands out, and I remember so well, was when I was asked to marry a non-member couple we were teaching. I came home about the middle of September and made my report at my ward, and then we had to report our missions in quarterly conference. Army career. First thing I had to do was sign up or register for the draft. I was exempt as long as I was an ordained minister, but as soon as I got home, I had to register. The first part of November, I was drafted into the Army. They gave me leave until the day after Thanksgiving, when I went by train to Fort MacArthur, California, and started my 3-year Army career. From Fort MacArthur, California, I was sent to Camp Maxey, Texas for infantry basic training. It was winter, and the weather was terrible, rain and snow, mud up to our shoe tops all the time. They really gave us the whole works, teaching us how to kill people with our rifles, bayonets, hand-to-hand knives, or any other way necessary. But we were taught how to be effective in killing people. As you can see, it was a real different world for me, just returning from a 2-year mission. I worked hard at being a good soldier, got all the sharpshooter medals, good conduct medal, and no write-ups at all. After about 3 months, I was asked to be the communication officer, which I accepted and did for about 6 weeks or about 2 months. My job was to be in control of the base radio and keep in contact with the officers that were on their separate assignments. This meant that I was with the company commander on all of our field trips. One day, the commander asked me to help him pick 3 men for transfers. I asked him where they were being transferred to. He told me to a combat engineer battalion. This sort of appealed to me. I thought anything would be better than the infantry, so I asked the captain to consider me for one to be transferred, which he did. Next thing I knew, I was sent to Camp Polk, Louisiana. The combat engineer battalion was just completing their maneuvers and ready to be shipped overseas. We stayed in Louisiana for 5 or 6 weeks, then got on a train and went north into Canada, then circled and stopped back in the U.S. at Boston, Mass. Camp Miles Standish was a staging area to get us ready for overseas duty. We left Camp Miles Standish after about 3 or 4 weeks, went by train to New York City, and went right to the port and boarded our assigned ship, Ship Life. We hardly got on board the ship when it left the harbor. It was late afternoon, and I can remember the empty, bad feeling I had when I realized where I was going, the reason I was going, and that there was a good possibility that I would never return to see my family again. I stood up and watched the Statue of Liberty as long as it was in sight. The ship had twice the number of passengers on it that was intended for, so we were assigned 12 hours deck and 12 hours in the hold where our bunks were. The trip lasted 3 weeks. We were escorted and took a zigzagging course. During these 3 weeks, we were attacked by German submarines. But worst of all, everybody was sick, diarrhea, seasick, and everything else. We were so crowded it was impossible to use the restrooms. Besides, there was no sewer water, and the mess on the floor was about 6 inches deep. The men with diarrhea and sick to their stomach would use their steel helmets and try to throw it overboard. Most of the time, the wind blew it right back on us. Anyway, we were sure glad to see Oran, North Africa. From May until the last of August or 1st of September, we had combat training in North Africa. When we left Africa, we went in convoy for the invasion of Italy, D-Day. On D-Day, Invasion Day, the first troops were scheduled to hit the beach at 4 a.m., but the Germans were expecting us and started to shell us with heavy artillery and sent wave after wave of airplanes after us that we were not able to get troops on land until the middle of the morning. Our battalion was put on the landing boats about 1 p.m. and landed on the beach about 2:30 or 3 p.m. On the way in, we saw our own landing boats hit by shell fire and all 30 men killed. The shells landed close enough to our boat to splash water on us. The boats were made to let the front end down, and when we got to the beach, the end went down and we ran on the beach looking for anything in the way of protection from the German fire. I dove into a trench on the beach and found I was on top of a dead man. I took protection behind one of our disabled tanks and dug my own trench. We were so disorganized that afternoon and night. I really don't understand how any of us survived. One of the generals came around personally from man to man explaining that we were probably going to be pushed back into the ocean. He said that our only hope was to form lines and pass ammunition from hand to hand to the infantry and artillery, and we did this all night. By the next morning, we had a small foothold on the beach. I was so busy all night I didn't think about the seriousness, but the next morning when I got into my hole, I couldn't sleep or rest, thinking that I probably never would get home again. On about the 4th or 5th day on the beach, our company was hit directly by a bomb from an airplane. Out of 48 men I was in charge of as a medic, 27 were killed and several more were seriously wounded. I have never before nor since worked so hard and so long trying to take care of wounded men. There was no doctor nor way of evacuating the men. The first 2 weeks were a living hell on the Salerno beach, always the feeling that you would not leave Italy alive. Occupation of Italy. We were able to advance only to Naples before the rains and cold weather came. Very little happened during the winter. The roads were muddy and hard to move equipment on. When spring came, we moved up through Rome and to the Arno River in Florence. It was our engineering battalion's job to build a bridge across the river. The Germans, as they retreated, destroyed all of the bridges except Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge across the Arno in the middle of the city of Florence, which is not wide enough for four-wheel motor vehicles to drive across. Winter came again, so we were at a standstill again. Our job during this second winter was just to keep the road open so the ammunition could be taken to the front lines. We dug a hole in the ground about 6 feet by 8 feet, about 4 or 5 feet deep. We covered the top with railroad ties and put all the dirt from the hole on top of the ties. The Germans would fire shells into our camp on a regular basis. We learned to eat and sleep in those holes, and the shell fire didn't bother us. When spring came, we started to move again. During this time, we stayed in tents and only in one place for a few days. Half of the men worked 12 hours at night. The other half worked 12 hours in the day. I was working nights and came in at 7 a.m., would eat breakfast and go to my tent and go to bed.
Minefield.
One morning after breakfast, I decided to shave and take a sponge bath before going to bed. I had my shirt off when there was a landmine explosion just 100 feet or so from my tent. Several holes were made in the tent from the explosion. I dropped everything and rushed out to see what had happened, and all the minefields were marked, so even though they were where we camped, we stayed away from them. But out in the middle of a marked minefield were two older people, a man standing and a woman down on the ground, and the men were running to get a mine detector, but when they returned with it, it wouldn't work. I grabbed my first aid bags and walked out to the people. The woman's foot was gone above the ankle and was bleeding bad. I used a roll of bandage and wrapped the stub and then picked her up and asked her husband to follow me out. I stepped in the same tracks that I made going in. I knew I was lucky I had not stepped on a mine and didn't want to take a chance while coming back. So when I got out of the field, I looked back and found the man had not moved. We talked to him and tried to get him to move, but he refused, acted like he didn't hear us. So I went back, again stepping in my tracks. I picked him up in my arms and carried him out.
My company commander reported this to the division headquarters, and I was awarded a citation, a soldier's medal, for my efforts.
German surrender. We advanced to the Po Valley on our drive, and the Germans started to surrender to us, not as an army, but by squads, companies, and battalions. We had a battalion surrender to us. When their commanding officer asked ours what to do, our commanding officer said the men were to disarm themselves. All of the rifles, pistols, knives, etc. were tossed away. Later, when we looked at the rifles and pistols, we found them fully loaded with the safeties off, ready to fire. Soon the war in Europe was over, but I received word that because I didn't have enough points to come home, I would be going to the Philippines and from there to Japan. Our ship was just outside the port when the news came over the ship's radio that the Japanese had surrendered. We all celebrated the day and most of the night. Around the world, after crossing the ocean and arriving in the Philippines, we were taken by truck to an area about 50 or so miles from Manila, where we stayed until we left in September to go to Japan and be occupation troops. By the time I got to Japan, I had seen so much of the world, all I was looking forward to was getting home. I hardly left the building I stayed in. I had no interest in the cities or the people. I stayed in Japan for about 5 or 6 weeks, went home by ship and landed at Seattle, Washington. It was only a few days, and then we went by train to Fort MacArthur, California, where I was discharged from the Army. I was in the Army for 3 years and a few days. Home and marriage. On the Thanksgiving Eve before going into the Army 3 years earlier, I went on a blind date with a girl named Elaine Russell. We went to a dance. I asked her to see me off for the Army on Friday night, but she didn't make it. I told my mother about her, and it wasn't long before Elaine and I were writing to each other. She sent me a wallet-sized picture of her, which I carried all the time I was in the Army. The same day I arrived home after being discharged, my mother went with me to go see Elaine. We made a date for that night, and in about 3 weeks, December 5th, 1945, we were married. And our first child, John, was born in Safford while we were living in an apartment that belonged to Elaine's dad. My dad and mother gave us a wedding present of a half acre of land in Thatcher if we would build a home and live on it. So Elaine's dad and mother gave us a wedding present of free rent in the apartment while we built our home. New job. My first job after I got married was with Arizona Commission of Agriculture. The pay was $175 per month, and it was shift work. I was able to do a lot of work on the house while working 2.5 years for the state. My mother died July 4th, 1947. John was born November 20th, 1946, just barely 7 months old, yet he could walk by July 4th. When Mother died, Dad didn't want to live alone, so we moved in with him. Jean, our oldest daughter, was born December 31st, 1947, while we were staying with Dad. During July of 1948, I left state employment and went to work for Brooks Lumber Company. I had to work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., but the pay was twice as much as the state paid. Brooks paid me $350 per month. I was hired to be their bookkeeper. I worked for them for 14 years.
I finished the house, at least enough to move in. Before winter of 1948, we had 2 more children, a daughter, Jan, and a son, Fred.
Family life, I think we had a fairly normal life. All 4 of the children attended the Thatcher schools. All 4 of them worked from the time they were in high school and bought most of their own things.
Jobs!
In 1962, I left Brooks Lumber Company and went into business for myself selling Farm Bureau insurance. It didn't work out too good because there was a lot of night work and the job required being out of town to attend schools and meetings. So after about 3 years, I went to work for the city of Thatcher as a policeman. Part of my salary was paid by Thatcher and the other half was paid by Eastern Arizona College. So all winter I did part of the police work for Thatcher and part for the college. In April 1965, I had my cardiovascular surgery in Tucson and was quite sick for a couple of months and really didn't get my strength back for almost a year. In 1969, I started working for the state again, the same department as in 1945, Arizona Commission of Agriculture and Horticulture. In 1975, my dad died. I was very close to my dad, and we had hunted and fished and done many other things together all of our lives. I still miss him very much. While working for the state since 1969, I have worked as a quarantine inspector, assistant to the station chief, as station chief, and as district director. My district included all of Graham and Greenlee counties. The inspectors inspect all plants, flowers, seeds, trees, produce, etc. that comes into the district from outside of Arizona. We regulate the native plant laws, and we inspect over 10,000 colonies of honeybees each year and many other things. Retirement. When I was 68 years old, Elaine and I felt it was time to retire. On October 1st, 1988, Elaine was 62 and was eligible for retirement. Retirement made a difference in our everyday living. It only took a little while to get used to it. We realized we were no longer tied down because of work. We could arrange time to do the things that we like to do, such as planting a garden, taking care of the 3½ acres, grooming and riding the horses, and going to all of the special occasions like baptisms, ordinations, graduations, missionary farewells, and just visit. Adamandi Aman. Soon after we retired, Jean and Dean with their family received a mission call to labor in Adamandi Aman. It was great to go to Mesa and be with them when they were set apart to attend their farewell, help them pack and leave for the mission field. After Dean and Jean got settled, we were invited to visit them. We flew to Kansas City, and Dean and Jean were waiting for us. We went to their house at Adamandi Aman. It was a very nice 2-story building. Each morning I went with Dean, and we were given an assignment. I had a great time mingling with other men while we worked. Work consisted of cleaning the area of noxious weeds, cleaning up and painting, planting new trees which will benefit the place in the future. Friday at noon the work week was over, so Dean reserved motel rooms in Nauvoo, and at noon Friday we left for a 2-day trip to see a lot of the church historical sites. Dean had reserved motel rooms in Nauvoo for the night. En route to Nauvoo we visited all of the places and took a different way back and visited more places. It was a great trip. We stayed a week. San Carlos. That January, Fred and I bought a nice boat with a big 80-horse motor. We pulled it from Mesa home and got it all ready for summer's fishing. After returning from visiting with Dean and Jean, I asked Jared to come and help me build an addition on the barn. We worked hard and finished the addition, and then made plans to go fishing at San Carlos Lake. We had a great arrangement with some friends who liked to fish. They liked to fish on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we liked to come home Saturday and attend our meetings on Sunday, buy our supplies for the next few days on Monday, and then return to the lake. This way someone was always around the camp and things weren't bothered at all. We had a lot of fun, and we did this for about 3 weeks. The fishing was good, and so was the weather. Sam came down and spent most of the 2 weeks with us. After the fishing trip, Jared stayed until time for school, helping me with different things, taking care of the horses. The 2 horses I have, Joe and Snip, are great. I enjoy taking care of them, such as grooming, shoeing, feeding, and riding. There are several teenage boys and girls that have taken an interest in them. They like to pet and groom and also ride them, and it is always fun to have the grandchildren come and ride them. Campouts. Some of my most memorable times were to be with my brothers and sister. Wyeth, Jerry, and me have been fishing and hunting many times. One year Nell and Harold came out, and we all camped together and had a great time. This was great to visit and remember the times when we were young with our mother and dad. Wyeth and I get along so good together. We go hunting quail and deer every year. I have killed 2 nice bucks while camped out and hunting with Wyeth. We fix a nice camp and stay for about a week. We go to Wilcox to clean up at Nell and Harold's and attending meetings on Sunday, and then go back to camp for a few days. John moves back. John and Myrna moved from Douglas to Cottage Grove, Oregon when Kristen was a baby and raised their family in Oregon. John applied for an administrator job at the Globe Hospital and got it. The family moved back to Arizona between Christmas and New Year in 1992. They are such a wonderful family. They are very active in the church. John has been a bishop, and Myrna has been in the Relief Society. David filled an honorable mission in the Canary Islands, and it worked out just right for us to attend his farewell and also the meeting where he reported his mission. Now, David, Amy, and Kristen are going to school at BYU Newhouse. In November of 1993, my father-in-law, Fred Russell, died. Martha's daughter, Mary, took her to Nogales, leaving their house vacant. Elaine, Carol Dean, and Jean worked out an agreement to split up their dad's money and property. Elaine worked full-time, taking care of her dad and Martha for several years, so she got the house as her share. After living in our house that I built for 45 years, we decided to move to Elaine's dad's house that she inherited. In April of 1994, we moved. Jason and Jared at EA. Jason and Jared wanted to come to go to school at Eastern Arizona College, and they have been staying with us this fall semester of 1995. We really like having them here. Both of them love to be out of the open to camp, hunt, and fish. We have spent some time doing this. Last deer season, Wyeth and I fixed a nice camp and stayed out hunting for a week. We both saw deer every day, all does and fawns, but no bucks until the last day. We were driving in the pickup looking for deer, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon we saw one standing by a juniper tree. First we thought it was another doe. We got out the field glasses. Sure enough, it was a nice big buck. Wyeth handed me my gun, and I shot and hit it, but it ran into some trees and bushes, but I couldn't tell which way. Wyeth went up to where the deer was to see if I hit it. He found a lot of blood. My doctor told me to walk very slow up hills. I went to a spot close by where I could see all of the area and didn't see the deer, nor could Wyeth find the deer, and it was starting to get late in the afternoon. Even if we found it, we couldn't get it back to the pickup, so we went back to camp. Next morning, we packed our things fast and went home. Jason was out of school, and he and I went back to where I shot at the deer. We found the blood, and after about an hour and a half, he found the deer. It was in the shade of a juniper tree. The weather was cool, and I had hit in the lower part of its neck in the jugular vein. No other damage was done to the deer. The meat was still fresh and good. Jason pulled and carried the deer down to the road, and we put it in the pickup. 1995 Christmas. Last week, Elaine and I were in Scottsdale making arrangements to have surgery on her left knee. The surgery is scheduled for January 4th, 1996. I am looking forward to having a great Christmas season